The book in the Bible called 1 Peter is the first of 2 letters written in the 1st century to Christians around the Roman Empire by the Apostle Peter. Peter was one of Jesus' disciples, so he's mentioned a lot in the New Testament. Peter's name was actually Simon, or Simeon. Jesus called him Peter, which means rock. Peter was a Jewish man who would have spoken Aramaic and Greek. He lived in a town called Capernaum in Galilee, in northern Palestine, which we now know as Israel. At the time, it was occupied by the Romans. Around AD 30, Peter and his brother Andrew were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. One morning, after they'd had an unsuccessful night fishing, Jesus approached them and asked them to throw out their nets again. Peter doubted there was any point, but did it because Jesus asked him to, and the nets came up full of fish. Jesus then invited Peter and Andrew to follow him and become fishers of people, and they became 2 of his 12 disciples. They followed him for the next 3 years and witnessed many more miracles in that time. Once Jesus healed Peter's wife's mother from a bad fever. Another time, the disciples saw Jesus walking on water towards them on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus told them not to be afraid. Peter jumped out of his boat to walk towards Jesus and made it a few steps, but panicked and began to sink. Jesus challenged him. If he was so afraid at that point, what did that mean for how much he trusted Jesus? Jesus took the disciples north to Caesarea Philippi. Nearby there was a shrine to the Greek god Pan, where fresh water flowed out of a cave in the base of Mount Hermon. Jesus asked the disciples who they thought he was. Peter declared that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. As a Jewish man, Peter would have been hoping for the anointed one from God to save and lead the Jewish people. Surrounded by pagan culture in the Roman Empire, Peter looked forward to the arrival of this Christ. However, Jesus then told the disciples that he must go to Jerusalem to die. Peter said, "No, Lord, this will never happen to you." Peter did not want Jesus to be killed by the Romans, he wanted Jesus to overthrow them. Peter's human cultural hopes blinded him, and he missed that Jesus also predicted he would come back to life. Jesus again challenged Peter's faith in him. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Jesus predicted that Peter would deny Jesus 3 times, and again Peter said, "No, that will never happen." At Jerusalem, Jesus was arrested, and Peter followed him and the soldiers up to the high priest's house, where he waited in the courtyard as Jesus was questioned. 3 times someone asked Peter if he knew Jesus. 3 times he denied it. What did this mean for Peter's hopes? Jesus was crucified, and on the 3rd day after that he did come back to life and appeared to many witnesses. Soon after his resurrection, Jesus gave Peter the chance to make up for his 3 denials. Peter was out fishing again at Galilee, and Jesus met the disciples on the beach. He asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter could say, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus then asked Peter to take care of his followers, to lead his church. Now Peter understood Jesus had overthrown death. At Pentecost, the disciples received the Holy Spirit, and Peter explained to crowds of people from around the Roman Empire how Jesus was the Messiah who was predicted in the Scriptures, and opened the way for everyone to have living hope. Peter led the early Christian church for around 30 years, reminding people about who Jesus is and what he did. Around AD 64, Peter wrote 1 Peter from Rome as persecution of Christians worsened under Emperor Nero. Peter and his wife were executed at the end of the AD 60s.